Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. You know, quite often we get so caught up in the daily grind of work or coaching or recruiting that we don't often take time to reflect. I would encourage everybody to take just a few minutes each day to try and see the bigger picture, to stop and realize that in the end, we're going to be judged on what we choose to believe, who we choose to love, and what we decide to leave behind in the hearts and minds of not just our players, not just our coworkers, but also our children. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Coach Tommy Amaker. Coach Amaker is the head men's basketball coach at Harvard University. Greetings, Coach. Thanks for joining us today.
Ty, thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, Coach, you're a veteran to the coaching profession. You've been there at Harvard for 13 years, 23 years total as a head coach, with a little over 30 years in the coaching profession. You played at Duke, assistant coach at Duke. You've been the head coach at Seton Hall, Michigan, now at Harvard, like I mentioned, for 13 years. So you played and worked with some great leaders during your time in the profession. So you're perfect to have on for the conversation to have on. I think I wanted to make sure I highlighted those things.
You're making me feel old, but that's okay.
No. We're seasoned, right? Wisdom is what we're talking about here. Of course, you know, the times are kind of crazy right now. This coronavirus is all over the world, and things are very uncertain. And to a lot of people, things became serious when sports were being canceled here in the United States. Shows you the impact of sports, and really specifically college athletics, right? We're probably the only country in the world that athletics is a part of the academics construct, the academic structure in our country. And I think that's a very important thing, right? It's a part of the academic conversation. Of course, you and I, as former student athletes, know how important that is when you talk about co-curricular activities and how college athletics enhances the academic mission of a university. Specifically, there at Harvard and the Ivy League were among the first, if not the first, Division I school and conferences to cancel basketball competitions due to the worldwide situation. And I want to know, have you on, because as a coach, players to look to you for leadership. And I wonder how the conversation went when you informed your players that the tournament would be canceled, and what kind of reaction that the players had to that conversation.
Yeah, Ty, it's obviously something that's very difficult and tough. But you started off right away when you used crazy times, and we've used that as well. We've also used unprecedented moments here. Like there's no playbook for this. There's no point of reference, and so when we shared the news with our players and our team and our program, it was devastating, as you can imagine, that things were over, or we made the decision through our university and through the Ivy League that our conference tournament was going to be canceled. And so you can imagine the thought and the mindset right away for all involved, especially our seniors who this is their senior year. These are their final moments that you dream about, and you work your lives and certainly your collegiate careers toward, and we were playing well, and we have an opportunity to do some pretty special things. The conference tournament was going to be held here at Harvard, and so all of those things are fair in human nature. But one of the things that I mentioned to our kids, and I'm proud of this, and it's obviously has come in a whole different looked upon in a whole different lens now. But I mentioned to our kids, I mean, we are a part of a bigger picture here. We're part of an amazing institution that is always trying to do what's right on behalf of our students, which obviously encompasses our student athletes. And so I support, and I said that, and I took a lot of flack and a lot of heat for it, supporting our president for the decision that he made, which was push and feel that this was the right thing to do. And I say that in terms of leadership. I mentioned to our kids, that in moments like this, they're unprecedented and there's no playbook, and, you have to lean on principles and people. And, what are our principles and our perspectives and our philosophies here at Harvard? And then the people that we have in charge and the leadership that we have from our president on down, do we believe and trust? And And I mentioned to our kids that I wholeheartedly believe and trust in our president. I said, I feel that way completely, and it's a decision that I'm supporting him, and is it tough on us? Absolutely. But I do trust and support that he has our best interest at heart, and this decision was not, made lightly. And as we look back now, Ty, you can see that, we were the first, and many people were, critical of us, and now we're looking back, and I've gotten calls now from people that said, man, you guys at Harvard must have known something. Well, you know what? I'm not saying we did, but we certainly felt like we were doing what was right. And when you do that, you can sleep well at night.
Yeah, one of the two, you said two things there I want to pick up on. The first one was that in times of uncertainty, you lean on principles and people. And I think that was that's very well said, and it was played out in terms of the decision made there at Harvard in the Ivy League, and of course across the country, as we see from this point in the last, 24 to 48 hours. You also mentioned about being a senior, right? You, like me, we were both former student athletes. You play your 3, 4, 5, however many years, and you get to your last game during your last season, your last year on campus, and how important that is to you. And of course, I was in town last week at the Harvard men's basketball game. You guys played a dynamic final game against your historic rival, Yale. What a way to end the season, right? Didn't know that was going to be the end of the season. But when you talk
That's right.
Right. And you talk to some of the guys who finished their eligibility with the win at Yale, and like everyone else in the country now, there's no postseason. How did they feel, especially when you talk to them specifically? Of course, in basketball, unlike I was a football player, there's a lot more seniors on the team. In basketball, there's usually not as many seniors. What was your message to them, and what were some of their reactions? The guys who, that final game obviously came out to their favor, but that's the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it's fair that they were, again, crushed and disappointed, and felt robbed in a certain way, and again, all the natural human nature, normal reactions and feelings that a human being would have, and we were certainly supportive of that, and allowed them to share their thoughts, and in some ways to vent, in some ways to be emotional and thankful. But I did mention to them that it's we don't have anything going forward, but you know what, we should be grateful and thankful for the last opportunity that we did have, which was the Yale win, which was the great performance by, our players, and their families were there because it was senior weekend, and we had a great reception after that game. And I said, think if we didn't have that and this season ended this way. Think if we didn't have those moments and our families weren't here, and we had a chance to celebrate something really, really positive and really cool. Think if we didn't have that. So, I wanted them to get into a mode of being grateful for what we did have and what we do have. And so, and I also mentioned to them that, we as, you guys are seniors, and I understand your feelings. I said, but, there's some people who didn't have sophomore years, or didn't have freshman years, or, there's some people who didn't have any years. So, I get it. I get where we're coming from. But let's not lose sight, of being grateful and thankful for what we did accomplish, we did achieve, and we were a part of. And I think when you put it in, a perspective like that, you're hopeful that, as teachers and as leaders, you're trying to push and train and get guys or people in general, to think outside of themselves, and certainly think about, what being grateful, what that means. We talk about that a lot in our program, and we talk about the only attitude is gratitude. We have a saying in our program that we talk about that. The only attitude is gratitude. And so, we find something positive in everything. That doesn't mean we have to like everything that's happened in its totality, but, there are things about it, that we can use from a very positive perspective that we should be grateful for. We also mentioned too, Ty, that, if we all sat around in a circle and we all threw our personal problems and things that, we deem that are unfair, and we all threw those things in a pile, and you start listening to what everybody else is going through and what they're throwing in the pile, you might be like, hell, I'll take mine back. It's not that bad. So
I'll take that win over Yale any day over what we're actually dealing with, right?
Because you start listening to what other people are dealing with and what they're going through. So we talk about perspective. And that's important for us to always keep your eye on perspective. And sometimes in moments, that are swirling and things are, chaotic and you said crazy and, we said unprecedented, it's hard to do those things. But as a teacher and as a leader, it's my job to see if we can also always bring about a semblance or an idea or a thought of perspective. And again, that goes back to what we said earlier, which is, what our principles are. And then certainly what the people that we have that are in charge of us, are we trusting and believing in their decisions that they have to make in these unprecedented, crazy times on behalf of all of us? Are we trusting and believing in those principles, in those people, while we're trying to bring perspective?
Right. I'll pick up on the people part you're talking about in terms of perspective. Bob Scalise, right, retiring at the end of the year. Who would have ever thought, like anybody, that his final year, things like this, the unprecedented, using the words you said, things happen. Talk to me about his leadership during this time, communicating with, I guess, Robin Harris with the Ivy League.
Yes.
Tell me about the leadership on campus in terms of athletics, dealing with Bob and his final year there and having to provide the leadership to you as a coach and then you providing the perspective to the student athletes.
For sure. Bob has been a tremendous leader, a great friend, and also a partner. It's one of the words he used with me when he was describing this opportunity, when they were, in some ways, recruiting me and offering me this position to come here to Harvard. That was one of the words that he used, and I always remember that, and I love that because it is a partnership, and he can't just partner with me or just with men's basketball. I'm sure he feels that way with all his coaches in his sports, but I do recall and remember and have talked about that a lot. My whole time here, my tenure here, is that he was steadfast in that word partner or partnership, and I believed in that. And so Bob's leadership has been vital and invaluable, and I think we're very lucky, and going back to another word, grateful, that we have Bob as the director of athletics in moments that are uncertain, that are, he is a guiding hand. He's been 17, 18, I'm not quite, many years here at Harvard now,
right.
and has been a part of this fabric of this community for quite some time, so he understands, the ins and outs, and so having his guidance and his steady hand as a leader right now is invaluable. And certainly, you take that even up a notch, is what I mentioned. I'm also the special assistant to our President Larry Backow, and so I mean that as well for our president, who ultimately is the decision maker. And the Ivy League takes, we take our cues in the Ivy League office. Robin Harris, who is the executive director of the Ivy League, takes, her cues or their cues comes from the presidents. The presidents are the ones who, set the structure and the table for the Ivy League decisions. And so I just know that Larry, President Backow, was certainly an amazing leader in a thoughtful way. And certainly Bob is in that category, and Robin's in that category of looking at what's best for our student athletes, what's best for our students, what's best for our institutions. And we were way ahead of the game. And we're proud that, we were doing what we thought was right with our principles, and we had the right people in place at the right time to make these kinds of very difficult, challenging decisions.
Right. Now, Coach, you as a coach, you're a leader in college athletics, a leader in your family, a leader amongst your colleagues in terms of the coaching profession. And as a leader and a coach, you try your best to prepare for everything, right? Prepare as much as you can so that when it's game time, all you have to do is execute. But obviously, this is a little different, unprecedented, the words you used. I wonder about your internal thoughts, right? When you're talking about leading people, leading your own family, leading within college athletics. Notice the NABC canceled the national convention, the core event where coaches learn a lot and do a lot of their professional development. But just in general, as a person, what are some of your inner thoughts in terms of the uncertainty this has provided for our country, our world, and everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a trying moment in time, and it's not just, as you mentioned, not just our country, but the entire world. It's a global crisis, and when you recognize that you're in the midst of moments such as these, which we're very hopeful that there won't be many. But it's inevitable that there will be some, and we're witnessing and participating in one currently. that you again, I'm going back to what we talked about initially here for our campus, and what I try to rely on is that you have to have a structure or foundation of principles that guide you, and then you try to have the right people in place for moments like this, that you may never see, but you're very hopeful that you have leaders that are in place that you value, you trust, you believe in. That doesn't mean that everything they do, everything they say, every policy that they're championing, that you always have to agree with or believe in. But when your back is against the wall, or when you feel like you're in a moment that's as challenging as one that we're part of right now, like you just want to feel like who you have in charge or who's in place for you or us. You're happy and you're grateful that we have that person. We have her, we have him, who making these tough decisions that you're very hopeful that that they're going to make the decisions for the right reasons, and for all people. And so that's what you have to think of, and that's what I thought of. And again, I'm big on us, and we got our program around our philosophy and our principles, and not try to go like from game to game how we're going to do this or that. Like we have an overall arching thought of how we should be and how we should do things, and so we don't feel like we always have to adjust a million times to how somebody else is playing us in a basketball game. We have principles and guidelines that we should feel like we're adhering to, and that's what we want to live up to. And then we feel like if we feel good about us, if we think we can live up to those standards that we have.
All right. Well, I'll say this, Coach. You mentioned people and principles, and you talk about the athletics director, you talk about the president, the commissioner, but there are a number of assistant coaches, there are a number of players and graduate assistants who look up to you as one of those people with principles to lead them, and probably even at home with family, to lead them through times of uncertainty. And realistically, Coach, I would love to have you back on when things settle out to talk about some of your principles, to talk about some of your vision, talk about your role as assistant to the president and some of the things you do there on campus at Harvard to follow up. But for now, I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I applaud you and the work that you're doing, and I would welcome the opportunity to revisit, and hopefully in times where we can say, like, this is how we did it, this is how we came through it, and this is how we got better from it. It'd be great for us to revisit it, and hopefully that's the nature of our conversation then.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That was Coach Tommy Amaker. He's the head men's basketball coach at Harvard University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.